So again, welcome. We are so glad that you're here with us for this wonderful Interreligious Understanding panel. My name is Naomi Sigg, and I serve as the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging here at John Carroll. And I was asked to help moderate this really illustrious panel here of really fabulous scholars in each of their different faith traditions. And of course I said, absolutely, I'd be happy to do this. And I said yes because when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, we think about the breadth of differences across all different types of identities. And spirituality, faith, religion, that's part of diversity. And it's a huge part of the John Carroll community's diversity, and we're very proud of that. We are proud to be an institution that welcomes people of all faiths, all beliefs, all religions, and we have that diversity here within our community. I talk a lot about belonging. That's, added to our division. And there's a wonderful image that talks about how diversity is a fact. It's a fact. In this room, in this very room, we have people from all different identities and walks of life. It's just who we are. And most communities are very, very diverse, just like us. Equity, however, is a choice. It's a choice for us to provide the programs, the courses, the experiences, the initiatives that support people in what they need based on those identities. Inclusion is the action. It's what we do. It's how we invite people to the table, just like we're doing today at this panel. And belonging is the outcome of all three of those things. It's how we create a culture and a climate where people truly feel that they're valued, they're respected, they're heard, and that they're welcome, right? So that's why I'm so proud to be a part of this panel, and I'm very thankful that we are going to have this opportunity to not only hear from our panelists, but we are also going to hear from you all. You're going to hear from each other. So this is not going to be one of those events where you sit and listen for 60 minutes. There's going to be a spot in the middle where you're going to talk at your tables about this very topic. So we're thrilled to give that opportunity. So with that, I would love to have the panel, and we'll just go in order here, just share a little bit about themselves and their scholarship as we kind of just lay out who everyone is here.
Well, thank you, Naomi, and thanks to all of you for coming out for this. My name is Ed Hahnenberg. I'm the chair of the Department of Theology and Religious Studies. I'm in my 12th year at John Carroll and 4th year as chair. I came here to take up the Jack and Mary Jane Breen Chair in Catholic Theology, and so the teaching that I do tends to be on Catholic topics. I do contemporary Catholic theology, of course, on saints and society, church and sacrament. I think my most intentionally interreligious course is a course called Sacred Quest.
Hello everyone. My name is Zeki Saritoprak. I was going to say go to JCU website and see my bio there, but I will say 2 words about myself. I am professor of Islamic studies. Teach courses on Islam and the environment, introduction to Islam, Islam in America. I have my students, some of my students are here. I recently published a book called Islam's Jesus, which is very related to our discussion today, and also another book called Islamic Spirituality. We established the Nursi Chair in Islamic Studies in 2004. Since then, I am the director of the chair in Islamic Studies. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Noah Bickart. This is my 5th year now at John Carroll. I can't believe it's been that long. And my 1st year as the Jack Joseph and Mort Mandel Chair in Jewish Studies. I teach courses in Jewish Studies, currently teaching a course on Abraham in the Bible and in later Jewish, Christian, and Muslim texts, and a course on Messianism, which may come up a little bit, and especially when it comes to interreligious engagement. Notions of Messiah and Messianism may stand, maybe less so in Islam, but also in Islam, but really stand at the crux of what it means for certainly Jews and Christians to talk to one another.
Thank you so much to our panelists. So as we get started, as I said earlier, the theme of Mission Week is interreligious understanding. And so how we communicate and interact with each other plays an instrumental role in broadening our understanding. And so I want to ask, in the order of Ed, and then Noah, and then Zeki, can you each share a little bit about how your faith tradition approaches dialogue and discernment?
Well, thanks again, Naomi. You won't be shocked to hear that we talked a little bit about what the opening question should be. So we had a little bit of time, and I think that the question is intentional, because I think that each of us in different ways, and sometimes quite different ways, feels called to this kind of interreligious understanding out of our own faith and religious commitments. And so as I was thinking about how I would respond as sort of speaking for the Catholic Christian tradition, how has this tradition, my tradition, approached dialogue, I would have to say at first, to be quite frank, not all that great for a long, long time. There's certainly, throughout the course of Christian history, many, many examples of saints and scholars who had open and inclusive attitudes towards others. But I think it's safe to say that the dominant trajectory over time has been one of exclusion. And I don't know, maybe that's something to do with the evangelical impulse of Christianity, the call to kind of share the message of Jesus with others, the kind of missionary mandate that Jesus left to Christians. But I think once that got combined, co-opted, intertwined with the coercive power of the state, as Christianity began to shape so much of Europe in the late antique and medieval periods, the drive to try to convert others too often became the attempt to compel them to belief. And I don't have to rehearse the kind of history of crusades and inquisitions and a long 2 millennia of Christian anti-Semitism that has sort of marred the Christian tradition. All of that, I think, forced Catholics in the 20th century to really sort of face up to that history. And particularly in the aftermath of the Second World War and the Shoah, or the Holocaust, that was a real clarion call for Roman Catholics to look at that history and come to terms with it and try to move forward in a way that was more inclusive of others. So some of my research touches on this global event that occurred in the 1960s, the Second Vatican Council, in which all of the world's Catholic leaders gathered together to take up a number of questions facing the Church. When Pope John the 23rd was elected Pope, he announced his somewhat surprise decision to call an ecumenical council, the Second Vatican Council, in 1959. So this was less than 15 years after the end of World War II. He knew that the Church had to face our complicated relationship and a sad history in terms of its relationship to Judaism. So that was on the agenda, and over the course of the next 4 years, the Catholic bishops came to a quite remarkable affirmation of all that is good and holy, not only in Judaism, but in Islam and Buddhism, Hinduism, and other religious traditions, and published this document, Nostra Aetate, that really not only called for Catholics to engage others in more positive ways, but also condemned the past history of condemnations and prejudice, bias, and so on. So the shift in tone and in substance was striking just 60 years ago for Catholics, but it has been wholeheartedly embraced, at least at the highest level in terms of all of the Catholic popes who have come since Council have called for this kind of interreligious engagement. That whole kind of process of coming to understand one another better didn't sort of magically wipe away all the very complex doctrinal differences between these different faith communities, but it certainly comes out of a desire to say we really want to understand one another better so that we can live our own faith more authentically and make the world a better place. in terms of like what I think as a theologian, what the sort of theological grounding for that for Catholics, at least one way to think about it, is this conviction that Catholics hold strongly and is shared with all other Christians, namely that every human person is created in the image and likeness of God. And beyond that, this belief that is distinctive, and it's one of the differences between Christians, Jews, and Muslims, that God became human in Jesus of Nazareth. That conviction, for Catholics anyway, encourages us to see all of human nature sort of elevated to a special dignity. And the very concrete particularity of Jesus' life calls us to pay attention to and learn from the concrete particularity of all of God's creation. So those are just a couple of sort of, I could go on and on, but just a couple of theological themes that ground sort of this desire to respect others, but also learn from them. And that, I think, is rooted in just this conception of the mystery of God. That God is always so more, Catholics believe, than we can ever name. And so we always have something we can learn about this mystery from others. This goes to Noah.
I always feel that I have a sort of complicated relationship to these kinds of questions, because on the one hand, my job here at John Carroll is to be an academic, to be a dispassionate scholar of the texts and the cultures that produced those texts in Jewish history. But clearly, another part of my role is in many ways to sort of be a representative of the current practitioners of Judaism, and those aren't always exactly the same thing. So that's one thing. The other thing is that unlike, and there are a lot of ways in which Jews and Catholics differ, but perhaps, and this is one of the things that we tend to talk about in our department all the time, among the most obvious distinctions is, at least within the Jewish community, is lack of central authority. That is to say, there's no Pope of Judaism. There's no official Jewish doctrine. And for those of you who have studied Jewish texts with me before, you will know that even within any given Jewish text, there is no uniformity of thought. In fact, there are always multiple voices on any given issue. As my colleagues like to tease me in department meetings, I am true to my Jewish self, in that I argue both sides of every argument. And in some ways, that's sort of part of the tradition. So asking about sort of what the tradition says about X, the answer is always, it's complicated, or it depends. I think another way in which the Jewish tradition is slightly different from the other traditions represented here is that both Christianity and Islam, in many ways, refer to Judaism and Jewish ideas. That is to say, it's hard to talk about Christianity without also talking about Judaism. And yet, for Jews, that is not really the case so much the other way around. That is to say, I could give you a pithy, it might have multiple voices and conflicting ideas, but I could give you a history or an ideology of Judaism that does not mention other traditions, and in some ways that makes it different. However, for the last 1700 years or so, Jews have lived under, largely, the political authority of other monotheistic traditions. That is to say that most of the Jewish world, in fact, basically all of the Jewish world, until relatively recently, lived under the political authority either of Christianity or of Islam. And there have been attempts over Jewish history to sort of articulate ways in which both Christianity and Islam might be seen as part of the world which in some ways is articulated by the Jewish view. And here I'm relying very clearly on the ideas of Maimonides, maybe the most famous medieval Jew and 11th century scholar, who articulates that while very medieval notion, that while Christians and Muslims are wrong, okay, right, let's bracket that, and it's going to be a problem we'll have to overcome. Nonetheless, he articulates that both Christianity and Islam are part of God's plan for the world. That is to say that monotheism spreading throughout the world, not because of Jewish ideas really, but really because of Christian and Muslim ideas, that this is part of the divine plan. And therefore, not only seeing Christians and Muslims as the religious other to dispute with and to deny, but to see these other traditions as sort of part of the unfolding of the knowledge of God throughout the world, I think that sort of offers the kind of beginning of an approach towards other traditions that that enables a kind of dialogue. But I also want to sort of retain the notion that there's a kind of core disagreement here. And I want us all to keep in mind that as much as we may celebrate commonality and celebrate the things we share, I think we also have to be honest about difference and to celebrate difference, even when it's uncomfortable. And I would sort of note the real Catholic approach to look deeply inside internal Catholic history and take that seriously. I think Jews have to do the same thing as well. And there are plenty of texts I could quote you throughout history. Yeah, maybe Jews didn't have political power in the Middle Ages the way Muslims and Christians did. But they certainly had intellectual power, and the kinds of things that they say about the other, they probably wouldn't have said about the other if they worked and studied in such close proximity to the other the way that we do here.
Is it my turn? Okay. Hello everyone. Peace be with you. That's the Islamic term. We say peace be with you. Now, we are lucky as Muslims. We are after Christianity and Judaism, so we can evaluate Christianity and Judaism, and all our references are referring to Christianity and Judaism. It's very interesting that in order to become a Muslim, you have to believe in Jesus. In order to become a Muslim, you have to believe in Moses, the way that is described in the Quran. So Jesus, for example, in the Quran is not the Son of God. He is the messenger of God. And Moses, probably the most mentioned prophet in the Quran. He's the symbol of justice. His opponent, Pharaoh, is the symbol of injustice. So all Muslim literature is evolved around this concept. The concept of prophecy, prophethood. About 25 prophets are mentioned by name in the Quran. And most of them are also mentioned in the Bible. So, excuse me, we have very strong connection from an Islamic perspective to the tradition of Judaism and Christianity. So you cannot actually read the Quran without referring to the Torah. You cannot read the Quran without referring to the Gospel of Jesus. The Gospel of Jesus. Singular. The Quran says one Gospel of Jesus. So it's also important that in the Islamic tradition, Christians and Jews are having a specific title, which is very positive title, and that is the people of the book. The Quran refers to Christians and Jews as the people of the book. That means the people of the Torah and the people of the gospel. And there is a verse also in the Quran. It says, "O people of the book." You know, like Naomi is asking why we are interested in dialogue. Well, from an Islamic perspective, it's a command in the Quran. You have to, actually. It says, "O Muhammad, invite the people of the book. Say, O people of the book, let's come to a common ground." That's a very powerful message. Let's come to a common ground. Yes, there will be differences. It's okay to be different. And it's okay to have differences, but let's come to a common ground. We are all believing in one God, monotheist, under the umbrella of the unity of God. And I think that is, if you Google my name, there will be many articles that I wrote on this subject, that how can this lead to world peace? Now, I have like a argument for this. In my books, also I mentioned this. Muslims, Christians, and Jews constitute almost 50% of 58% of world population. So more than half of humanity. Muslims, Christians, and Jews are constituting more than half of humanity. If they can come together, they can make a big change in the world. And they have to. And that is my argument, and I think that's why it is not like a luxury, it is a necessity that they should come together, work together for the world peace. And that's why I would like to thank those who have organized this, and thank you all for participating, for coming, and I look forward for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our panelists. So much to think about and really important insights, and I appreciate hearing from each faith tradition, your perspective on how you bring each other into the conversation, into the dialogue. And so as I said at the beginning, this is not going to be a panel where you just listen to the four of us the whole time. So this is now your opportunity to engage with each other. And so we have a question to ask of you, and we hope that you will take about 5 to 7 minutes at your tables to discuss with the people at your table. This is reflection and action. This is dialogue, within our community. And there's so many folks here, and I'm excited for all of the insights you will learn from each other. So the question we want you to discuss is, why is interreligious understanding important to the John Carroll community? And how can it enhance the educational experience for students, for staff, for faculty, for alumni, for our whole community? Why is that important? So why don't you all just take about 5 to 7 minutes, I'll call you back, and then we'll have the panelists answer a couple more questions. Perhaps there's space in your residence halls with your friends to have these types of discussions and dialogue. We hope that they continue. So I'm going to ask the panel, and it can be whoever wants to start us off. Of course, we're incredibly fortunate to have the chairs of the 3 Abrahamic faith traditions who are such experts and scholars in the field, as you all have experienced. Having spoken to you all, there's really a hope for continued collaboration and a lot of opportunities. What do you hope to see in 10 years as a result of the collaboration and the presence that you have here at John Carroll?
Well, so 10 years out, I hope we're still having this conversation. I hope that I hope it's our students who are up here instead of us. I hope there are more voices at the table. I mean, I think more immediately, at least what the things that get us excited is continuing to do what I think we do best as a university, which is teach students and do our research. So continuing to offer courses in theology and religious studies that touch not only Catholic theology, Jewish studies, Islamic studies, Asian religions, but also courses that explicitly address interreligious themes. I think that there are a whole lot of ways in which we can support students from a variety of different majors and career paths. I mean, I think that the collaboration with the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging is a key one. This launch of this new minor in diversity, equity, and inclusion is a great opportunity. I mean, let's be honest. We don't have a lot of good examples of constructive dialogue out there in the world. And I think that engaging difference in those who are different from us may very well be the greatest challenge we're facing as a society. And that's why I think that interreligious understanding and engagement in classes, in the dorms, on campus, in events like this, but particularly in the classroom, it's a place where you can kind of develop those skills of careful listening, of attentiveness, of critical questioning, that you can apply to a variety of other situations of difference. At least that's been my experience in the classroom. Students tend to be, my experience has been really interested in talking about different religious beliefs and their own beliefs in relationship to them. Less excited about talking about differences in terms of race, economics, gender. So maybe there's a way in which we can practice and build some of these skills more broadly. I hope that John Carroll is a place that can convene larger the larger Cleveland community can bring. This can be seen as a kind of a meeting place for the Jewish and Islamic and other religious communities in the area. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about is, and our department is considering, is a proposal for developing a center for interreligious understanding as a way to kind of coordinate a lot of this energy. John Carroll is blessed in that not only does it have 3 endowed chairs in these 3 great religious traditions, but we have this endowment specifically dedicated to interreligious understanding, interreligious studies. And it was donated by the Toohey family, I think back in 1965, as part of this Catholic enthusiasm for engaging Jews and other Christians and so on. So I don't know, I could go on, as I said, could go on, but maybe you have other things to say or your own hopes to add.
I have a controversial hope for 10 years from now. And this is that I wonder if John Carroll, because of its Jesuit and Catholic status, might ultimately be a place where Jews and Muslims can interact over the conflict in Israel-Palestine in ways that are more healthy than they tend to be. Certainly for many American Jews, connection with and identification with the State of Israel is a core part of their identities. And certainly for many American Muslims, solidarity with the Palestinian cause and a real push for justice in Palestine is an incredibly important thing. And I say this as someone who has lived in Jerusalem and attempted to cross the very real border which exists between Jewish Jerusalem and Arab Jerusalem. And I am sad many times in our American context where the fact of the conflict sort of precludes the ways in which Jews and Muslims interact with each other. And I am so encouraged at John Carroll in the ways that Jewish students and Muslim students and Jewish faculty and staff and Muslim faculty and staff are really deeply welcomed into this community. And I wonder if there are avenues through the study of the other and through the study of religion that we might enable people who don't always talk about one another and to one another in such productive ways, as they're both sort of minority groups within this broader culture, to engage with each other in ways that might ultimately be more productive. I doubt that we will solve the conflict here in University Heights. But, who knows? If we can model different kinds of engagement, that the kind of sort of hope for peace that Zeki articulated so well, I think we could be furthering.
Yes, I agree with both my colleagues. I think there's an Islamic principle, and it's a saying of the Prophet of Islam, says never trivialize anything that is good as a small. If it is good, even small is important. Never trivialize it. So this is a good step. From 10 years from now, I am very optimistic. I was going to say this room is not enough for our gathering. We should have probably a bigger one 10 years from now. We will have a center for interfaith connections, interfaith encounter. We will have many events, and we will, in fact, I am hopeful that we'll be able to make JCU as a center in the United States with this regard, because we have a strong foundation. As Ed mentioned, I think John Carroll is one of the first universities that had a chair in interfaith studies in such an early time, 1965. So we have a strong foundation. We just need to go forward and build upon it. Thank you.
Can I say just one more thing? I was thinking, because it came up in the conversation here, and I wanted to share it with you because it's part of kind of the vision, and that has to do with this notion of engaging difference and attending to the other. I think, unfortunately, this is my concern. Unfortunately, sometimes well-meaning attempts to respect diversity can stay at a rather superficial level, and it leads to the conclusion that, oh wow, we're really all just the same, which is not something I think that any of us would want folks to walk away from thinking. As true as it is, and everything I said about our unity as human beings on this planet made by God, yes, we are all the same. But I worry sometimes that when we jump to we're really all the same, what we're really saying is you are a lot more like me than I thought. And we don't really listen to the other. We don't really understand where they're coming from. So that was one thing I think that is often one of our worries, that there is real beauty in the diversity here, and that the universal truths come not from kind of the least common denominator or abstracting from all of this, but the real universal truths come from the particularity of each distinctive position or claim. And I say all of that as a Catholic out of the belief, and I think our tradition's conviction, that learning about the other is not about watering down your own faith commitments, but deepening them, understanding them better. It's precisely those commitments that call us to that engagement. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've had Catholic students, when we're talking about Ramadan, or they've been talking with their roommates about Ramadan, when they think about the practice of fasting for a month, from sunrise to sundown, and they think about what their own church asks them to contribute in terms of fasting, they're really humbled by that. And there can be ways in which, even at the personal level, it can be quite inspiring to learn about others, and you start to see your own faith tradition from a new perspective. Sorry.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much to all three of you, and I hope that what you are saying is going to happen, that we will be a space in the United States where we're seen as experts in this interfaith, interreligious learning and dialogue, and I hope we need a bigger room too next time. And that there will be many more of these types of, I think, panels and discussions with other, I think, scholars from each of these faith traditions and beyond. You know, I hope that we might see some folks from different faith traditions come here as well. So last question for the panel, and then after this question, we will have some time. If you all have questions that you want to come up and speak with each of our panelists, you are more than welcome to do so. But our last question is just, how can we all learn? So what are some courses that you teach that students can be a part of? What are the talks that are coming up? Maybe you are speaking, or you have the different speaking engagements. What are the books and articles that you've written that you think would be very helpful for us to maybe just start in each of your respective areas?
Well, I'm going to say for the students, take our classes, and for everyone, read Zeki's book and read Noah's book. But you may have more practical suggestions.
Well, then I should say read Ed's books, so that we avoid self-promotion. But I think here there is no a matter of self-promotion. We just like to share with you. It's my passion to work on this field. You know, I enjoy doing this. I love my classes. I love my students. They feel it. They feel that I love them actually. And I don't do it as a part of like a burden for me. It's a kind of enjoyment when I share something that I know with my students. And I wrote many things. I don't get money for those books, by the way. You know, the loyalty is like $55 per year. That is that's unbelievable.
That much?
But I think the benefit of it, that people are reading and benefiting, is so rewarding. Like, I gave an interview to NPR a few years ago. I think it was in 2015. Tom Jalton had an interview with me. One of my students told me that he searched, and in 10 million titles, that comes number one. So I said, that's a very good news. That what we have said is read. People are reading, that's why it becomes number one in 10 million. So if you Google this question, do Muslims and Christians believe in the same God? Because it was on the occasion that a professor at, I think, a college in Chicago area, Puritanical College in Chicago area, fired a professor who said, we Christians and Muslims believe in the same God. She was fired. So Tom Jalton is interviewing, saying that, do you believe really in the same God? So is it accurate to fire her? You know? Well, I think the court eventually turned down, but she had a big problem by saying that. So I suggested that, yes, we believe in the same God. Because the Quran says, when Jacob, about to die, he asked his children, after me, which God you will believe in? And they said, we'll believe in your God and the God of Abraham and Isaac. And I said, we Muslims believe in the same God, the God of Isaac, the God of Abraham. So that became number one in 10 million. I don't know how it happened. So I, you know, many articles I wrote on this. One of the articles that I strongly recommend, and it should be available online, I think PDF online. It is called Muslim-Christian Relations Leading to World Peace. And this way, actually, eventually I go to the people of the book. If they come together, we'll be having peace. We'll be contributing to the world peace. Another article is about the people of the book, specifically if you like to have more legal things about it. And again, it's available, I think, as a PDF probably on JSU website also, on JSU library website. Because library sometimes sends me and says your articles are downloaded around the world. Like so far, 6,000 downloads came, I don't know, for a year. So it's very good news. People are reading, so that's very good. The article is called An Islamic Social Policy Towards the People of the Book. An Islamic Social Policy Towards the People of the Book. That is also a good article if you have time to read it. Thank you very much.
I think it's lovely, of course, that when Dr. Saritoprak says it's good news, right? Evangelion, right? Evangelism in Greek, that's what that means, good news, right? So I wonder if there are linguistic ways that these things affect one another. And Zeki and I always play this sort of, it's the greatest party trick of them all, that because we're essentially, yes, we're scholars of Judaism and of Islam, which really means that we're both scholars of Semitic philology, since so much of Judaism is dependent on Hebrew language, and so much of what it is to be a scholar of Islam is to be a scholar of classical Arabic, and biblical Hebrew and classical Arabic are really, really close. So we get to sort of play this game constantly of, and we were even doing it on the panel. What does that word mean? Oh, right, it means this. We have the same concept, right? And it's exactly the game that we, right? And when we do this, Ed then says, welcome to my life, right? One of the things that I hope that will come out of the courses we all teach is for everyone to be critical of the very notion of religion. Right? And not to accept religion as a first-order category. That is to say, that even the notion that there's this thing in the world that we call religion comes from a particular time and a particular place. There is no word for religion in the Hebrew Bible. So that the very notion that there is a distinct sphere of life which is the religious, as opposed to a sphere of life which is not religious, whether it's secular, well, that dichotomy, right, has a history. And so that when we map that notion onto the rest of the world, but by the very fact that presumably, and I love using this example in my classes, if in a particular residence hall, right, an RA would say, okay, for our event, we're going to worship Shiva. Come everybody, it's mandatory Shiva worshipping time. I suspect people would have deep problems with that. And many people wouldn't want to go. Somebody might even call up the press. Right? But if we said we're having yoga time, right, that would be okay. So why is it that we assume that this one aspect of Hindustani culture, the worship of Shiva, that's religion? But yoga, no, that's stretching. Right? Right? This is a distinction that really only makes sense in a world in which Christian distinctions, really Protestant distinctions, between the religious and the secular take hold. Now, I'm not asking anyone to abandon the notion that there is a religious sphere of life and a secular sphere of life. That is true for us, and we shouldn't abandon that. But if we could at least be sort of self-critical of the ways we look at the world, maybe the metaphor is the glasses, the lenses through which we look at the world, I think all of us are okay with people deciding to put on particularly colored glasses. We all do it, right? It's incredibly useful. But I think the study of religion helps us be aware of the ways in which we are looking at light which has been refracted in ways we ourselves have chosen to refract it. Right? That simple understanding may be enough to sort of be careful about the assumptions we make about the world. And I think that's really why everybody has to take 2 TRS classes in this university, to be deeply challenged by at least 2, challenge their own assumptions about the world. And this is really, in many ways, what it is to be part of the university community. Is to challenge your own assumptions, and I think that's what the study of religion really is all about.
Thank you so much to our panelists. What a phenomenal 60 minutes we've had with them. So I want to do a couple things before we end. I want to ask that those who have been part of the planning of Mission Week to just please stand so that we can recognize you and all the work that you've done. So if you are a member of the planning team, we'd love to just recognize you and say thank you. I have one final question for you all that you don't have to answer, but just think about this. What will you do with what you learned today? This does not mean anything unless we take what we learn and do something with it, whether it's take a course, read the article, read the books, come to more events, do some of your own research, have a dialogue with someone else who may be the same or different than you. Do something with what you learned today. So I ask that you think about what that looks like for each of you as individuals. So thank you again for being here and for being part of this. Again, there's another Mission Week event tomorrow, Breaking Bread, that starts at noon. Starts in the Interfaith Commons right here in this building, and we hope that we will see you there. And finally, if you do have individual questions for each of our panelists, they will be up here for you to have a conversation, ask your question. And thank you all for taking the time to be with us.
Just one quick announcement. My students, I forgot a sign-in sheet for your transactional extra credit. So if you're here, just email me saying you were here so that I can give you your extra credit.